So I've just seen what is definitely so far the first truly great horror film of 2021, and I'm very excited about it. It is the brilliant Censor, made by Prano Bailey-Bond. This is a movie about, as the title suggests, a censor in the sort of early 80s video nasty movement and the sort of psychological effects that it has on her. It's a really interesting movie. It's filled with kind of really fun throwbacks. It's creepy. It's thought-provoking. I loved it. The film premiered at Sundance, virtual Sundance, so I was able to watch it from home. And I'm very excited as I'm about to be joined by the writer and director of Censor. She also is a long-term friend of the pod. Welcome back, Prano Bailey-Bond. Hello.
Hi, Mike.
This is really exciting. I remember the first time we chatted on the podcast, and I think at that point you were sort of saying, yeah, I'm just like in the early process of writing my first feature and everything. And here you are now at Sundance. How cool is this?
I know, you've been there the whole time, haven't you? No, it's been really, really amazing. Like, yeah, Sundance is such an incredible platform, and it's been a nuts weekend.
I bet, I can imagine. So tell us a little bit about Censor. What can people sort of expect from Censor?
Well, it's a psychological horror set during the kind of video nasty era, and it follows a film censor who sees something in a film that harks back to the day that her little sister disappeared. And when she investigates the filmmaker, she goes on a journey that kind of blurs fiction and reality.
So cool. So I remember seeing your short film Nasty, which kind of dealt with sort of similar themes, right? What is it about this particular era, the sort of the video nasties and this sort of time period that sort of really inspires you to make these films?
Well, the way in for me to censor was actually the idea of a film censor, because you're like, oh, that's such a fascinating job. But I kind of quickly landed in the video nasty era because it was just the reaction to these films that, I guess, this idea that society thought that these films, or the press and the MPs thought that these films were going to turn us all into monsters. And it's happened so much throughout, you know, the ages, like comic books in the 50s, and we've had it with video games, you know, we've got it now with social media, although that's a whole other thing. But I just think it's almost like we're considered to be one step away from, like, you know, doing something really, really bad. Like, we're going to watch a Lucio Fulci film and then want to go out and take our scissors with us and like hack over people to death. And I guess it was like, what does that say about us as people? Like, that we're so frightened of ourselves. And that was kind of where the idea of Enid came from, that it was like this person who thinks maybe deep down she's a terrible person.
Yeah, and really interesting because, you know, Nasty, I remember focused on, it was a male character really that it was focused on predominantly, wasn't it? What sort of inspired you to focus more on the character of Enid in this particular story?
It actually started as a male censor. Very, very early on. It was like a really silly idea in my head. Often my ideas start with something really silly. But it was, you know, the idea I kind of went in with was very much like, you know, if these violent images are supposed to make us commit violent acts, what is it that protects the film censor from losing control? And I was sort of first drawn to a man because obviously there was a lot of violence towards women and things in these films too. But it really quickly moved to being a woman. And I think it's because I was more interested in what I was talking about before, about the idea of us thinking that we're a bad person. And I think it felt like if I made it a male character, that it would lean more into the sexual violence, which I think is a really interesting space to explore, but wasn't the space that I wanted to explore.
I remember as a horror fan, like, and I'm sure we all go through this, right? Like, you kind of want to track down and check out a lot of these movies that were banned at this time, right? It's almost like a kind of checklist of like things you've got to see. Are you personally just a fan of a lot of these video nasties from this era? Did you kind of rewatch a lot of them while sort of prepping for this film?
Yeah, totally. I am a fan. I'm a massive Argento fan, Lucio Fulci fan, Sam Raimi. You know, I mean, Texas Chainsaw Massacre has to be up there with like
Oh,
one of the
yeah.
best horrors of all time, I think. And these are the films that are kind of remembered and being remade now, but then there's a whole kind of murky, like lower down bunch of films that are just insane, and like Nightmare in a Damaged Brain, which pops up in the title sequence. Like
Hmm.
I watched that and I was like, oh my God, you're going, what have I just seen? You know, Basket Case. Like I'm a huge fan, and being able to watch and rewatch all of these films and call it work for this project was pretty cool.
Is there anything about this kind of argument that you agree with or empathize with? Like, do you think that censorship in any form of art should exist?
Well, this is the thing, because when I first started working on the film, like I feel that no, it shouldn't. Like I'm on that side. However, when I saw a Serbian film, I had a really strong reaction to that, and I was like, "Oh my God, this shouldn't be out there." Like some of the things I'd seen, I remember watching it. I watched the uncut version in a very kind of video nasty way in some ways, because I was working at a pub at the time, and I met this guy who used to bring in uncut versions of films for me in like a plastic bag.
Oh, amazing.
And he'd bought me a Serbian film because it was doing festivals, but it kept being like taken off festivals because it was so problematic. And I watched it with my housemate, and I remember coming out and my other housemates going like, what have you seen? And I was like, I can't talk about it. I didn't want anyone to know.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say because it felt so wrong, but what I just watched. And then I started going, oh, so if that's where I draw the line, like other people's lines are just, you know, much lower down in terms
Yeah.
of the violence spectrum. So I guess I just find it a really interesting conversation, and I definitely wasn't going into making Censor wanting to, you know, tie all this up in a neat little bow. It's really, you know, there's a lot of stuff in there that I think that's layered into the film, that I think about horror and what horror is helpful for. You know, why we want to watch it, why we want to make it, how it creates a kind of safe space for us to be scared and a catharsis for us. But then there's also, I think, setting the film during the 80s does allow you to look at censorship in hindsight. It allows you to look with a different set of goggles on, because we look back now and we're like, wow, what an overreaction. But when you're in that moment, I guess you don't know what the future is going to be. So yeah, it's a whole conversation, I think.
Yeah, it is. And I think, like you say, people sort of draw the lines at different places, don't they? I've seen a Serbian film recently, and we talked about it, about how even like you, like even some of the more sort of hardened horror fans really sort of recoil about that film. And you know, I understand it, but then also I had to tell myself as I was watching it, I was like, this is just a film, right? It is just, as far as I'm aware, no one was actually harmed in making it. It is props, it's actors, it's a script, it's makeup, it's, you know, and so that kind of helps me sort of think, okay, well that art is allowed to exist then. Weirdly, I had more of a problem with, speaking of video nasties, like Cannibal Holocaust, at like the actual animal cruelty, right? And I try and draw the line for myself at being like, I don't really want to see something that has sort of actual harm. But then that's also murky too, right? Because it's like, well, what is harm? Who knows what was done to certain actresses on some of the sets of this film? And again, that's sort of something that you in your film sort of explore as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, because you hear so many stories from that period as well, don't you? And even from more recently, all over the
Yeah.
way people are treated on set. And I mean, you know, The Shining is a fascinating example of that. And I've seen footage of Shelley Duvall and Kubrick, and you're kind of going, is he a genius or is he like a torturer, you know? But I completely agree with the Cannibal Holocaust. Like for me, violence towards animals is the thing that just I you know, like that I find it really difficult to watch. And actually it was because of that, it was one of the scenes that I showed the actors when we were rehearsing, the actors playing the film censors, because I wanted them to try and understand that these people were going into work and sitting there and they didn't know what they were going to be seeing. And you know, when I spoke to film censors from the period, I said to them, like, did you ever feel like you were watching a snuff film, or did you ever think you were watching something real? And you know, there were things like Faces of Death, which obviously did have real footage in it, and something like Cannibal Holocaust.
Yeah, that's it. I think it's important to know that context. I think that's what's really interesting about your film, is that it does bring that balance. Like, I don't think you're supposed to look at the character of Enid as some Mary Whitehouse type, are you? That's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, not at all. I mean, we played with that. Like, that was always a question, was like, how extreme is she? But then it was always about coming back to this idea that Enid, even she says in the film that she's driven to censorship in order to protect, and that was obviously to link it back to her backstory. But there's like a David Cronenberg quote that I can't remember exactly how he put it, but he said that the film censor that's driven to protect is the most dangerous censor of all, because I guess there's something quite nannying about that. And again, you know, that there's like this whole like aspect to film censorship that's incredibly hypocritical. Like, I think James Furman even had the attitude, who was the BBFC head of the BBFC during this period in the 80s when this was all going on, that, you know, we can watch this stuff, but if someone living in a council estate in Manchester watches it, then we don't know what's going to happen to them. And it's like this idea that, you know, if you're educated and intellectual and middle class or whatever, then you can handle it, but that other people are stupid and it's going to make them want to go out and do something terrible. And you just think, well, what do you think our morals are based on? You know?
Yeah. Do you think as well, I mean, like you mentioned this earlier, but when you look now at social media, at, I suppose, what people call cancel culture too, I mean, has censorship ever gone away? I mean, we laugh at that period now of the early 80s, but is it still here, in your opinion?
I think it's the fear of technology that's still here that I see more so. I mean, definitely the censorship aspect, that's been really interesting. People in the States have sort of connected the film to the idea of what's been going on around Trump and censorship in the media. And we weren't thinking about that, obviously, when writing the film. But I think that there's a different thing going on now with social media that is to do with algorithms and politics, and it's got like a real political power, which I kind of drift between going, oh my God, am I being hysterical thinking that, you know, am I doing a social hysteria video nasty moment, or, you know, should we be really worried about this? Because it's all stuff that we're creating these technologies and we don't know how they're going to affect us. Then I don't know. I mean, social media, I'm still on the fence about whether or not I'm hysterical or not.
Yeah, I know. I think we all are, aren't we? I noticed that Kim Newman is like sort of credited as part of this film, right? Yeah. He's an exec producer. What was sort of Kim's role in helping with this film?
Well, he's been an incredible support to me through my short films as well. He actually has there's a little pop-up of him in Nasty, if you watch closely. He's on the newspaper being arrested by the police, which I love. So, and he was really supportive making Nasty as well. And when we started to go out to, you know, to financiers with the project, he was just amazing and supportive and kind of putting his name to the project. And obviously he's like the godfather of the video nasty era. So to have someone like that to like lean on in terms of, you know, asking questions about that period or saying, can you read a draft of the script? And I think it just makes you feel like safer, I guess, you know, in terms of the stuff you're dealing with, because you want to be as accurate as possible, even though you're taking it, like I say, in a very imaginative different direction. So yeah, he's just been a hugely wonderful friend and a massive support, and it's great like meeting all the fanboys when I've been out with the project, even when we were pitching, people coming over and just telling me how much they love Kim Newman, who are they're from Canada and countries and yeah.
He's a legend, isn't he? That's it. And I think this film is going to be a film that so many fans of that era and so many fans of the genre are going to love. I, as a sort of horror nerd, loved sort of noticing or spotting what I thought were references to certain things. There are parts of it that reminded me a bit of Possession, Andrzej Zulawski's Possession, and it looked like there were visual nods to Lynch at times and Blue Velvet. A feel of it kind of reminded me a bit of something by Peter Strickland as well. Like, it was like bringing lots of things to mind. Did you sort of draw on any particular inspirations when making this?
I think the video nasties themselves are an obvious inspiration because they're about, you look at, like when I was looking at Shooting of Thunder, the film that Alice Lee appears in, I love Lucio Fulci films, and so they were kind of my go-to. I think I'm inspired by loads of different things, and I guess, when I was writing the film, you're talking to different collaborators and using different references for specific ideas. So for example, with my DP, I think I was saying, let's look at like Black Swan and The Machinist, and really how do we stay in the mind of somebody who's like slowly unraveling, basically. And then, for Neve, in terms of the performance, I was sending her things like Let's Scare Jessica to Death, and
Nice.
Those, and also actually the piano teacher, because she's such a hard kind of
Yeah.
nuts character. She was great, like as a kind of reference for Enid, even though I think Enid's not quite as brittle as the piano teacher. So there were lots of different influences, and I mean, Lynch is one of my favorite directors, and I've been watching his stuff throughout my entire life. Like, I started watching Twin Peaks when I was way too young to be watching it, so I feel like he's influenced me massively in just the way that I think about what film can be, because he kind of makes me think film can be art. It's the way that his work is so imaginative and bonkers, and you kind of can open your imagination and your mind up to like weird twisted realities and things like that. So I definitely think he's been a huge inspiration for me in general. And it's funny because quite a few people have mentioned Barbarian Sound Studio, and I actually had the idea for Censor before Barbarian Sound Studio. Like, I've had the idea for a really long time, and I remember when that film came out, and I was like, oh god, that sounds like Censor. Like, I was a bit worried, because you're always, the whole way through making a film, you're always thinking, oh my god, what if something else comes out and it's about a censor, or it's and I went to see that, and I loved it, and thought, okay, it's great, because it's not the same, but I can see why people are drawing like parallels with it. And I'm a massive Strickland fan as well. I think he's actually thanked on the credits, because I connected with him in post-production, and he was really helpful in terms of some wise words of support through the process.
That's so cool. So I mean, already the reviews seem to have been amazing, right? Like, Peter Bradshaw gave it 4 stars. Jacob Stolworthy from The Independent said it was his favorite horror film in years. Mark Kermo tweeted something like, "Oh, I feel like this film was made for me." Right? I mean, how have you found that? Were you going to read reviews, or were you going to just try and sort of ignore them? And how have you found it, sort of generally so far?
It was funny because I was a bit nervous, obviously, in the run-up, because when you make short films, the only people that really pay them any attention are people that like them. And it's not the same. I've seen my friends make their features and have all kinds of reactions, and so I was really like steeling myself for what was to come. And I told my boyfriend, I'm going to do the Q&A, and I know that the reviews will start coming out, but I'm not going to look at the internet. Can you look and tell me I should look? And I finished my Q&A, and he screenshotted and WhatsApped me from another room, like, all these amazing comments on Twitter. And it was, it's been really fascinating, actually, to read some really thoughtful pieces of writing already on the film and how much people have really got, because when you're developing a project, you're trying to balance that, like how obvious is something, and all the layers of what you're trying to say. It feels like people have really engaged with that, and there's some people that, you know, haven't got it, and that's fine, and that's we kind of expected there to be some people that didn't completely get it, but the majority, and like you say, people like Bradshaw and Commode have like been so glowing, and it's pretty weird, I have to say. I don't think it's quite landed in my mind yet.
It's so cool. So finally then, I mean, there are so many people I know from like that really want to see this. Do you know how and when people are going to be able to see this sort of post this festival?
Yeah, I don't know yet. I can't say where it's going next yet, but we'll be able to say soon. But in terms of release and things, that's all, yes, watch this space.
Awesome. And anything sort of in the pipeline next for you, sort of project-wise, or are you just taking a little well-deserved break?
Well, I started the year going, right, I'm going to write my next film in January when I go back to work. And then I was like, okay, it's really hard to build up to the world premiere of your film and still be, because we only finished it just before Christmas, so we're still, you know, there's still things going on, finishing up, tying it up, but I've got a couple of ideas that I'm writing next, and other things like floating around, so now it's just a case of deciding which one to start with.
Amazing. I cannot wait. Prano, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Mike.
Looking for more horror content? Subscribe now for more videos like this one, and listen to the Evolution of Horror podcast. Head on over to evolutionofhorror.com.